Hey, what's up guys, it's Graphic Phoenix back with another video today, and today is May 5th, the 5th day of May Madness. Today we are making a closed terrarium. This video is going to be a tutorial on how to set them up, what the process is like, what plants I'm going to be using, and ending with the finished product. So stay tuned, it's going to be awesome. As you can see laid out in front of you is the supplies that I'm going to be using while setting up this terrarium. There are a couple things that you don't see here that we'll go over later on in the video. But probably the most important thing is this right here, and this is the terrarium that you're going to be choosing. Now this is a terrarium from Michael's that I decided to pick up. There's many different ways you guys can find these glass jars with lids on top of them. You can find them at thrift stores, you can find them all over the place. IKEA had a bunch last time I was there, so there's a lot of places you guys can pick these up. This costed me about 20 bucks. I had a coupon though, so it ended up costing like 15. Unfortunately, a lot of people overlook this part of the build, but this is the drainage layer. I'm going to be using just these pebble rocks. You can find them outside. You can buy aquarium gravel. You can do whatever you like for the drainage layer, but I strongly recommend that you have a drainage layer of about an inch. It doesn't need to be much more than that, but it shouldn't be any less than that. You do want a good amount of water to be sitting in the reservoir to kind of go through the water cycle where it's evaporated, then condenses, and then goes back down into the soil. The next thing we have laid out here is the screen that we're going to be using to separate the drainage layer from the substrate layer. This is crucial. You can use weed blocker, but it's actually much finer and doesn't let as much water through. So I'd caution you against using that. This is just a standard window screen that you can find at any Rona, Home Hardware, Lowe's, whatever. It comes in a big roll, so you really only need to buy it once, and you can make as many terrariums or vivariums as you want. On top of that drainage layer, we have charcoal. Now this is lump charcoal that I bought at Rona and just broke it up with a hammer. Now you don't need to do this. You can actually just buy carbon for fish tanks. It works basically the same. It acts as a filter from when the water is going through the substrate down to the bottom layer. It filters out the water. It also gives good area for breeding the springtails. Moving up on the column of, I guess, from bottom to top in the terrarium, we have our substrate additives. So we have 3 substrate additives right in front of you. We have a orchid bark, we have coconut coir. This is Zilla's jungle mix. It's basically a mixture of sphagnum moss and peat moss. Then we have a little tiny bit of potting soil. Because I'm not going to be adding any animals in here, I'm just going to use some potting soil as a little bit of nutrients for the plants. And then we also have a tiny bit of coconut husk because that's all I have left. We'll also be adding in some crumpled dried oak leaves. Now these are great for vivariums. They're also great for a ground cover. I'm going to be adding this and mixing it into the substrate. It adds a little bit of airiness. It gives something for the macroorganisms like the springtails and the isopods to feed on and to kind of subsist on. Now that we've talked about everything that's going into the vivarium, now we can talk about what goes on top of the substrate layer. I have a piece of cork bark and a piece of driftwood that I cut off one of my larger pieces of driftwood. These are both things that you can use. However, you can use wood from outside and other stuff. You just want to make sure that you treat it and you're not bringing in any crazy bacteria or microbes or mites or whatever from outside. So I recommend if you're getting some wood from outside or by a river or something like that, that you have about a 20-minute bake at 150 to 200 degrees in your oven, or you can soak it in boiling water for 10 to 15 minutes. Some of you guys might be wondering what plants I'm adding into my terrarium. I'll be going over that when it comes time for planting. So hold your horses and let's set it up first. Now you heard what the substrate is going to be composed of. Now it's time to actually put it together. Keep in mind that when you're adding your substrate into your terrarium, you want slightly more substrate than you have space in the false bottom. So you're going to want about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches if your jar is compatible with that of substrate, compared to the 1 inch of gravel that we're putting at the bottom. I'm just going to be using these 1.5 ounce or 45 milliliter Dixie cups as kind of our parts. So basically we're adding 1 part of the coconut husk, 2 parts of the potting soil. Keep in mind, if you're adding potting soil to the mix, you really don't want to be adding any animals in here. Of course, I'm going to be using the springtails and the invertebrates and whatnot, but you don't want to be adding any frogs or anything like that into this mix just because there are unknown fertilizers in these potting soils that likely aren't very good for your frogs. To the mix, we'll be adding 3 parts charcoal, 6 parts of the jungle mix, 2 parts orchid bark, and about 3 parts of the coconut core. There's a couple things that I didn't add in here that if you would like, you can add to your setup. You can add chopped up sphagnum moss, just finely chopped up with scissors. It's perfect. That'll help hold some humidity and some water retention in the soil. As I'm building this, my plants don't like extremely soggy soil, so I'm going to be using more of a mix that's a little bit more prone to having the water run through it. Once you have everything in the bucket, obviously a most important part is actually mixing it, making sure that everything's all mixed in there nice and good. Now in my lump charcoal, I actually had some pretty large pieces of charcoal, so I'm just going to filter through here and grab some of the larger ones that kind of fall into my hands. Now that we have the substrate all ready, we can finally move on to setting up the terrarium and getting this show on the road. While you're adding the first rocks in, you want to be careful because you got to keep in mind this is a glass container and these are rocks, so you don't want to be dropping them from super high up. And being that this container is about a foot tall, I'm going to actually be placing them in the jar and not just dumping them from above. As you can see here, we have about 1.5 inches of drainage layer. That's going to be perfect for what we're looking for in this and creating a great drainage layer for the water to flow down into. It's important to have a false bottom because the water actually will go through kind of the whole water cycle in your mini terrarium. Basically what it'll do is it'll accumulate in the bottom layer there, then it will evaporate into the glass, it'll condense on the sides and then flow back down into the substrate. So we're trying to make a healthy ecosystem here. Without this, basically what happens is it gets all soupy and nasty in the substrate. Then you have some issues with anaerobic bacteria growing and it smells extremely disgusting. So what I've gone ahead and done is actually put in the substrate barrier, the mesh screen that I talked about earlier, and I've just held it down with a couple lumps of charcoal. Now I'm not adding too much charcoal simply because we actually added quite a bit into our substrate mix. So now there is one thing that I forgot to add to the substrate when I was making it with you guys, and that is dried baked oak leaves. You can use magnolia leaves, oak leaves, Indian almond leaves. I definitely recommend oak and almond leaves because those are the most readily available. You can find them on Amazon or any local like terrarium shop. And basically all I'm going to do is shred them into here. Once I'm done adding these leaves, we can begin to put the terrarium together and add the substrate. Well, I haven't added all the substrate just yet. I probably won't add all of it. This is about as much substrate as you're going to need. Now, keep in mind that it depends where you're setting this, but mine is going to be in an open area that should be viewable from all angles. So you want to kind of play that aspect up. I'm going to be viewing it from one angle more specifically than the other, so I'm going to grade it towards the back a little bit, and then we're going to add some cork bark and the driftwood, and then we're going to scape it and stuff. Take your time with this step, make sure you set it up nice, and just play with it. This takes me probably 10 or 15 minutes, if not longer, to actually get the desired effect that I'm looking for. So don't be worried or stressed if you're taking a lot of time to get something accomplished and you just don't like the way it turns out. If you have enough time, honestly what I'd do is set it up. Then once you have it set up, leave it for a day. Go do whatever you need to do for a couple hours or like the nighttime, sleep on it, whatever. Then come back to it in the morning. If you like the way it looks still, then hey, you know you got something right and you can just go ahead and plant it now. So moral of the story, just make sure that you take your time. Don't rush this process. Turn on some jams, figure out what you want to do, and enjoy it. With a little bit of mess and the use of a spoon, this is what we've created. See here, there's kind of a gradation. You can see it goes up. It starts low, and then it kind of moves back there. It goes between the two pieces of wood and then up to there. So the main focal site's obviously going to be that nice tall piece of driftwood in there, and then there'd be kind of a foreground being in front or up here, and then a background with potentially some taller plants at the back here. These are all things that you have to consider when setting up your terrarium. More practice makes it possible to do some more creative things. Let's get started with the planting. I'm going to kick you guys into a time lapse and we'll see you at the end. So as you can see, it is now fully planted. I showed you guys a quick clip of me planting this terrarium, but if you want to go see the full thing, please stay tuned for tomorrow. I actually have a plant selection video for your terrarium coming out tomorrow. Definitely stay tuned for that if you guys are looking to choose some plants for your own terrarium at home. I'll tell you what plants I have in here. I have a Alosia something. I don't know what species that is. There's a Magravia right on the bottom there. Oakley fig, Ficus pumila, quadrafolia. Down there is a Ficus panama. That is a rainbow selaginella. This is some fine baby tears. There's a couple different species of moss. I have no idea what they are. And there's Peperomia prostrata right there. If you want to learn more on plants and how to select plants for your terrarium, please go check out tomorrow's video. I also leave a link on the screen. So those of you that are curious and are watching this later on, definitely go check it out. It will help you out. At this point, you might be thinking, oh, great, now I can just mist it down, close the top, and we should be good to go, right? Wrong. So something that most people don't add into their terrariums is kind of a cleanup crew. With high humidity, low airflow, sometimes there can be a buildup of fungus or mold or something like that growing in the tank, and we need something to combat that. So Mike, what is that magical thing that combats that? Well, the magical cure to our mold and fungus buildup problems are these little guys right here. These guys are called springtails. They are a form of invertebrate that is basically a detritivore, goes through your substrate, cleans things, maintains it, continues to aerate it, even fertilizes it to a certain extent. These are something that are not commonly recommended for terrariums. However, based on my research and based on my knowledge about the vivariums that I have, these come in handy. I strongly recommend you source some, buy some if you possibly can, and it really makes the whole environment more of a system rather than just a stagnant area. In combination with these, we also have another little secret to this terrarium build, and that is dwarf white isopods. These guys are awesome little cleaner uppers. They're great at cleaning up larger waste and just good for overall decomposition of organic matter. This is the main reason why I added those leaves into the mixture, because these guys will feed on them and will consume them, breaking them down into fertilizer for the plants. Now with that being said, you might be asking yourself, Mike, how the heck am I going to get these into my terrarium? And that's really easy. Honestly, what I'm going to do is just go in here, grab a little handful, and there's a couple in here. I know I saw a bunch as I grabbed them, so I'm basically just going to take this little handful and place it into my terrarium. And there you have it. You have now added your isopods into your terrarium. As you can see, we have a ton of them floating on top of the water here. What we do when we're done that is we pour them into the terrarium. And there you have it. You have your little microhabitat filled with springtails and isopods. When you're misting the container, you want the glass to clear eventually. You don't really want it to be always completely saturated with water. That's a good indication on that you've misted too much. I'm going to get some RO water and mist it off camera, so I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys learned something. I know this was probably the longest video in May Madness yet. I hope you guys stuck around for it. I really appreciate all of you that made it to the end of this video. For those of you that did, please leave the word selaginella. You guys can spell that as many ways as you can. Please leave that word in the comment section down below if you made it to the very end. I want to thank you all for watching. Make sure you tune in tomorrow for that planting tutorial that I will be uploading. And have a great rest of your day. If you guys liked the video, drop a like down below. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that about setting up your terrarium, please don't hesitate to ask. And if you like my videos and want to tune in for the rest of May Madness, there's still plenty of days left. Subscribe to my channel and you'll be notified every time that I post a video. So thanks for watching, guys. Graphic Phoenix, out of here.